Should your sword fighting scene be realistic or fantastic? Can it be both? Welcome back to Writer's Theory. I'm James Winterthorn, and in this video, I'm going to carry on our series on writing action scenes. So far, we've covered some basics, how I generally approach action writing. And the last action writing video was on using guns in action scenes. And in this video, I wanted to talk more about a different weapon, that being sword fighting. Uh, in movies, swords are big and flashy, and the sequences are well choreographed and fun to watch. So, how do we approach this in fiction writing, where we can both achieve our storytelling goals and portray these sword fighting scenes in ways that we intend to? So, just for clarification, what I'm going to talk about is how to write sword fighting scenes that are first realistic, if that's what you're after, or the ones that are fantastic, the ones that have lots of action and lots of swinging blades and very exciting visuals. I'm going to talk about both of those things. Maybe how to blend the two. But first, I'm going to talk about the most important factor for whether you decide to do one or the other. And that being, what are the rules in your story for this type of action? This comes back to the basics and foundations of world building. World building comes into play here because we need to decide if the world that we're living in, if the setting is one of realism. If we were just trying to tell things as they would really happen and try to describe those things. So if we're telling historic fiction and we want it to be as accurate as possible, what would a sword fight look like? If this is a fantasy novel and much of the action and storytelling involves fantastic fights that go on for minutes or hours or days or however long. In which case, there's a lot of exchanges with the weapons, and nobody deals a fatal blow right away. Uh, we have to decide what those are, and then we build the world in such a way that this sword fight or sword fighting that happens in the story is believable if it fits into the rules we've established within this world. So, first, let's consider what a realistic sword fight looks like. Things we'll want to consider here are what the actual weapons are, how they're supposed to function, because different swords do different things, and just what realistic fights might look like. So, for realistic sword fighting, you're going to want to do some research. You want to learn what type of weapons might people use, how those weapons were used in combat, whether that's in a larger battle or like a duel. You'll need to determine whether armor is involved, whether the characters are wearing chainmail or plate armor, and that will determine how the fight goes. And then once you've got all of these things figured out, like you figured out the the weapon, the armor, these things that go into the setting and how the fighting will behave, and what are the rules. You can then get to the actual action sequence itself. You'll need to work in beats again. So if you watch my previous action videos, you know this is my preferred approach to writing action is what is the mini scene we're going to write and what are the characters both trying to achieve, what action takes place, and then what is the consequence of that action. In this case, we want this to be realistic. If there's no armor involved, and let's say it's a duel like we see in movies, and they're using uh, rapier swords or even a long sword, it's going to be a lot of anticipation. So you're going to do a lot of describing. You're going to build the emotional state of the scene as much as you can, and a lot of anticipation. Maybe a lot of touching of the swords, but not actually swinging of them, where they're trying to gain measured distance between each other before any actual attempts at striking each other happen. Because once you attempt to strike somebody, you are now vulnerable. So once the attempts at uh, actually injuring the other party start happening, the fight would happen very quickly and likely be over very quickly. So you'll want to keep that in mind that duels, especially without armor, are going to go very quickly. So you'll want to build the scene up. You want to build anticipation. You want to feel the emotions. What are the fears? What's the adrenaline that the characters are feeling? This is going to be a big part of what a duel might look like. And then, of course, you'll describe the action. Um, and it's if you've never, let's say you've never fenced before, you've never done HEMA or used swords in a way that you might actually uh, pretend to be in combat. It goes very, very quickly. It's much faster than you might think. So you'd have to describe that quickly too. Um, you know, so when it comes to the actual exchange and or the blows and injury that might happen, just take care to work in beats. So what is the intent? With character A lunges at character B, character B does what, right? Um, and what happens? Did character A strike the blow on character B? Was it deflected? Did character B parry and thrust his sword at character A? So you'll work in those beats still, but you're not going to have a lot of back and forth exchanges. You're not going to have a lot of swords clanking together constantly, where uh, characters are attacking the sword. That rarely happens in sword fighting. Um, in sword fighting, one person uses their weapon to attack the person, not their weapon, which is what we see a lot of in, especially in Hollywood, uh, sword fighting scenes. So basically, the actual exchange will go very quickly, and you'll have a lot of anticipation to build up to that. So things to consider in addition to their emotions: what is the setting? How does the setting affect their duel that's about to happen? What is the weight of these weapons? What are the skill levels of these people fighting with these swords? These are the things to consider in realistic sword fighting. Now, if you're still writing a realistic fight scene instead of a duel, at least like a gentlemanly duel with like rapier swords, maybe you have an armored fight. Now, if with armor, you're less vulnerable to attack, so you might see a lot of swinging of the swords and banging off of armor, and then getting to the point where the characters start um, basically wrestling with each other, trying to um, find ways through each other's armor. In which case, the swords are less effective, and they might start using smaller bladed weapons. Um, now, if you're this is of course more medieval combat than it is sword fighting, but it's something to consider. If you're going to have armor, more than likely a sword is not going to be as effective. Now, if you're so more things to consider, has to do with your setting, has to do with the rules that you've established. And today's video sponsor is me. It's James Winterthorn here at Writer's Theory. And if you've watched several of our videos, some of our videos are how-tos or they're tips and advice on how to improve your writing. Well, if you want to build your foundational skills and you want a good tool to learn how to write things like action or world building, or you want to flex your dialogue writing skills and have a chance to get published, well, I have the perfect thing for you. I've created a boot camp here within Writer's Theory. It's called Fiction Bootcamp. And within it, you can work on your skills of description, your skills in dialogue, in character development, in world building, and in writing action. And you can flex those skills, you can write a unique story. And one of the coolest features of the Fiction Bootcamp is that the story you write within the bootcamp, you can upload and potentially get published here on YouTube. So every quarter, every 3 months, I will select one student's writing to be featured here, and you'll have your own dedicated video that'll get uploaded to YouTube and potentially be featured and published. So you'll get to develop your fiction writing skills, have the chance to be published, and you can do all of this for less money than my last DoorDash order. I've got a link below. Check out the Fiction Bootcamp. Build your fiction writing skills, have an opportunity to get published, hopefully have some fun in your writing journey. And I hope to see you in the Fiction Bootcamp. And now, back to the video. You'll have your exchange. You'll probably have a very impactful and meaningful moment after that exchange, because somebody is probably going to be injured, maybe gravely, maybe not. Um, and if it's realistic, uh, in periods where there were sword fighting, any wound from from a bladed weapon, any wounded really, um, would have been challenging and most likely get infected. In the modern era, we're not necessarily fighting each other with swords. So, what happens to the character after the sword fight? Does one die? Does one get injured and have an infection? Is it cleaned immediately and there's no big deal? Try to keep that in mind as you write out the consequence of the scene in general. So, when it comes to uh, exciting sword fights, things that you think of Hollywood action scenes in Star Wars with the lightsabers, fantasy stories where there's a lot of back and forth with swords, um, things that are generally unrealistic for how swords would be used, but are fun to watch. They're exciting. Um, this is often this has been my experience, and I'm really curious if you have read great sword fights. I'd be really interested to know what uh, what books you read. Where did you read a really good sword fight, especially high action, unrealistic, lots of exchanges, sword fight in printed works um, that you might see in like Hollywood action sequences where it's highly choreographed. I'm really curious what's out there because my experience in getting to um, these types of scenes is that I'm always let down. Not to say that the writers of those stories weren't good writers, but they didn't emphasize the action sequence that was happening. And I don't know why. I don't know if this isn't an exciting thing to write, if it's more challenging than it's worth, or if I'm just reading the wrong things. But the approach I would take here is another choreographed, working in beats approach. So in this case, we're going to use a lot of descriptive language. We're going to have more dialogue than you might have in a realistic sword fight. So you might describe in great detail the scene, the weapons moving through the air, the sound of metal clanking against itself, or against, or the sound of swords banging against each other, people jumping through the air, almost like a dance. So we're going to describe the fight scene in this way. And it's okay in this setting because earlier in the story, we've built the world as such where this type of fighting is just normal. This is what you expect from master swordsmen. It's a lot of jumping around and attacking the weapon rather than the person, and vying for position, and trying to figure out the other person's moves, and this type of back and forth between characters is more acceptable once you've established that earlier in the story. So still working in beats and still what's the goal of the exchange that's happening? Is one character trying to measure distance, trying to see how the opponent reacts to a certain attack, and then he's going to learn from that, and then try again with a feint. You can have a lot of these uh, types of actions if we're not trying to be realistic with it, right? This type of sword fighting is especially true if, like in Star Wars, we have a different type of weapon that is more exciting. If people had laser swords, nobody would have hands, right? Like there wouldn't be a lot of flashing, moving about. You would just run the lightsaber down the other lightsaber, and like everybody's hands would be gone. Like makes no sense. Like that's not the point though. Like you want it to be exciting. There's supposed to be a lot of arcing of flashing lights, and with real swords you can do the same thing. You have the flashing of the blades as they dance through the air. But you do this in small scenes. So you break it up. What's the intent? What happens? Like what's the actual action, and what's the consequence? So you still work the same way. You're just over describing, and you're working with a lot of reflections. And since there's metal, now can you blend the two? Well, of course, you're the writer. You can do really whatever you want. The important part here is that you've built your world and your setting in such a way that whatever style of sword fighting you choose is believable. So you can have fast exchanges, and maybe you have a lot of them. And maybe this is okay because the two opponents are legendary sword fighters who know each other's moves. Um, and then you can have that realistic but heavily choreographed interaction between them. You can have a very quick and fast interaction with one character who loves to do reverse grip, and uh, because you've established that character in your story and that this is effective for this character, people will uh, believe that, or at least they'll suspend their disbelief that reverse grip is a real effective technique. Really, whatever you decide will work if you've built the world and the expectations in such a way that your reader isn't put off by the style of action that you write. So build the world, decide how realistic you want it to be from uh, fast and brief and extremely dangerous to lots of action and weapons flying everywhere and characters jumping through the air, to who knows, maybe even the use of magic. Just be sure to establish those rules. Work in beats as you work through your action scenes, and you should end up with a pretty good sword fighting sequence. So I will continue this series on action writing. I'm having fun doing it. So if you have suggestions about what you'd like to see in specific types of action writing sequences, let me know. Thinking maybe the next one, we'll do some magic. We're going to go full fantasy, and we're going to do some magic fight scenes, or at least some magic action sequences. Not everything has to be fighting. I'm sorry I've done that in the past couple of videos. So maybe we'll do some action that has to do with magic. If you'd like to see that, or you want other writing related content, you want to follow my writing journey here on YouTube, well, please like and subscribe. I try to put videos out every week, and I hope to see you in the next one. You could even have some fun and do like reverse grip. If people had laser swords, nobody would have hands.